Digital and video games have been both demonized and upheld for their impact on children, teenagers, and young adults. On one side of this contentious debate are those people who believe that video games desensitize children to graphic violence and inspire them to engage in aggressive behaviors. On the other side of this debate, however, more and more people are looking to games as a means for educating and engaging young people in school and society. In his article, The Rhetoric of Video Games, Ian Bogost describes how the Nintendo game Animal Crossing is both a form of entertainment about life in a small town and a didactic lesson in financial literacy. His dual reading exemplifies the potential role that video games could have in an educational setting. He states, video games are not just stages that facilitate cultural, social, or political practices. They are also media where cultural values themselves can be represented for critique, satire, education, or commentary. When understood in this way, we can learn to read games as deliberate expressions of particular perspectives. In other words, video games make claims about the world, which players can understand, evaluate, and deliberate. Bogost then goes on to describe how people in different positions can further the role of games in a learning environment. He states, game developers can learn to create games that make deliberate expressions about the world. Players can learn to read and critique these models, deliberating the implications of such claims. Teachers can learn to help students address real-world issues by playing and critiquing the video games they themselves play. And educators can also help students imagine and design games based on their own opinions of the world. Bogost's argument about the educational aspects of traditional video games can also be applied to other types of digital games. For instance, ARGs, short for alternate reality games, through their overly complex problems, teach or enhance players' knowledge about engagement in socio-political behaviors. Alternate reality games are games that utilize both online and offline spaces. However, it should be noted that these games are distinguished from another type of game that also utilizes both spaces called augmented reality games, such as Pokemon Go and Harry Potter Wizards Unite, because, unlike these, alternate reality games are built upon the premise that there is no difference between the everyday lives we live and the game world. Because the ARG is inseparable from the quote-unquote real world, it is easy to compare activities in the game to social, civic, and political behaviors we observe every day. Two such behaviors that are taught or enhanced by ARGs are how to organize mass groups of people and how to mobilize these groups across space or time for a common goal. The YouTube channel Extra Credits gives examples of these behaviors.
I Love Bees presented its community with 210 sets of paired numbers with no explanation. The community had to then figure out that these numbers were actually global positioning system coordinates and times. After that, they had to realize that each positional location corresponded to a payphone. And then finally, they had to coordinate with no help from the game creators, who were still busy maintaining that this wasn't a game, to make sure that someone got to each phone at the specified time. At the appointed time, each phone rang with a piece of information or narrative that would push the game forward. Not a single phone call was missed.
As demonstrated by this story, the ARGs require players to organize and mobilize, and in doing so, educate them about the complexity of engaging in socio-political behaviors.
But at the end of the day, we as the people have to be fed up and say enough is enough! Enough is enough!
Studies have further discussed the role of games in encouraging civil and political engagement in players. In informal learning among teenagers through video games, for instance, researchers found a positive correlation between playing video games and the development of valuable skills, such as entrepreneurship, creativity, time and money management, critical thinking, teamwork, and cooperation. Likewise, in the text, The Civic Potential of Video Games, researchers argue that interactions in video games can model Dewey's conception of democratic community places where diverse groups of individuals with shared interests join together, where groups must negotiate norms, where novices are mentored by more experienced community members, where teamwork enables all to benefit from the different skills of group members, and where collective problem solving leads to collective intelligence. Both excerpts described here discuss the role of video games in developing skills which can be translated into the public political sphere. Alternate reality games, then, can be regarded as taking this education one step further by having players both develop and actively utilize these skills. The abilities that ARGs and video games develop in players can be regarded as socio-political because of their role in social, civil, and political activities. For example, social protest movements, like ARGs, require participants to organize and mobilize. Additionally, those which have occurred in the last 10 to 15 years, including the Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, and Black Lives Matter, have moved between online and offline spaces. These movements utilize the affordance of social media in particular to reach wide audiences, spread messages quickly, and form communities. Marcia Munt, Karen Ross, and Charlotte Burnett further discuss the role of social media in the Black Lives Matter movement in their article, Scaling Social Movements Through Social Media, the Case of Black Lives Matter. Partly due to its public sphere nature, social media creates participation opportunities, such as boosting protest turnout or supporting fundraiser campaigns that broaden mobilization, thus helping scale movement endeavors. In other words, by using digital spaces, the Black Lives Matter movement organized like-minded people and spread messages which resulted in the mobilization of these groups in offline places. This is exactly the same method used by alternate reality games when they ask players to organize and mobilize to achieve game objectives. By looking at the shared characteristics of ARGs and the socio-political activity of participating in protest movements, it becomes clear that games may indeed play a bigger role than just that of mindless entertainment. While young people are playing, they are also learning, enhancing their ability to interact with the world and engage in complex campaigns. From the financial literacy Bogos described in Animal Crossing, to the organization and mobilization that Extra Credits described in I Love Bees, games are playing an important role in the construction of young people's worldviews. It is important to recognize and incorporate games in formal education, for it may allow for new educational opportunities in the classroom.